Let's go ahead and start with item number 1, AB 56 by Assemblymember Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senators. I want to begin by thanking you personally and the staff for working closely with my office on this bill. It's been a long process, and really appreciate your help and assistance. I would also be happy to take any amendments needed to ensure that the language in AB 56 is consistent with other legislation approved by this committee. On September 9th, 2010, at about 6:15 p.m., a 30-inch natural gas transmission pipeline owned and operated by Pacific Gas and Electric Company ruptured in the city of San Bruno in California. The force of the rupture launched a pipe segment of 100 feet away from its original location and left a crater 72 feet long by about 26 feet wide. An explosion and fire ensued that killed 8 of my constituents, injured dozens more, and destroyed 38 homes. Although the cause of the explosion is still being investigated, extensive federal and state hearings have revealed serious flaws in the way California regulates the owners and operators of natural gas pipelines. AB 56 places new standards on utilities and regulators to hold them more accountable for ensuring the safety of our state's aging pipeline infrastructure. The bill makes some of the following changes. Number 1, it ensures that ratepayer money will not be used by a utility to pay for any penalty or fee assessed by the California Public Utilities Commission. Number 2, it increases accountability by tracking how ratepayer money is spent. 3, requires the PUC to establish minimum standards to install either automatic or remote shutoff valves where feasible. 4, it directs utilities to share their emergency response plans and any information regarding the pipeline system with state and local emergency responders. This bill also requires the PUC to consider a gas corporation's safety record in determining a reasonable rate of return. I understand that this last issue, has caused some controversy, but I wanted to explain why this is an important provision. As the analysis points out, informational hearings held last year by this committee shed light on the fact that rate cases for gas corporations are based on compromises and settlements with very little regard to whether the budgets are based on safety. This is the same criticism raised by the CPUC's independent review panel. In fact, one of the recommendations made by the panel was that for the PUC to adopt performance standards for pipeline safety and reliability, and to include the possibility of rate incentives and penalties based on achievement of specific and specified levels of performance. The reality is that safety has become part of the rate-making process, and the cost should be shared by the ratepayers and the shareholders. This bill simply asks the PUC consider the safety record when determining the rate of return. It does not require anything else. Members, safety should be a requirement for any utility that operates in California. The utilities fear that including safety would scare off investors and increase the cost of capital. The reality, as we have seen, is that pipeline explosions scare off investors. Currently, safety is an unknown for Wall Street, and this creates an uncertainty for investors. Including safety in the consideration of return will reduce this uncertainty. AB 56 seeks to make needed reforms to ensure that the PUC is adequately regulating the pipeline industry, that utilities are operating safely, and that there is increased accountability and transparency over California's management of its vital pipeline infrastructure. As lawmakers, we have the opportunity and the obligation to take every step possible to ensure the lessons of this tragedy are well learned and that the circumstances are not repeated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask one question for clarity before calling up witnesses.
Of course.
From your presentation, I take it that you are accepting, at a minimum, the suggested amendment in the analysis under comment number 5, just the conforming the language of your bill with
Correct.
Previous bill said. Okay. There's another suggested amendment relative to the rate-setting piece.
Correct.
Just want to make sure you're taking that as well.
That's the amendment that I'm not comfortable taking, and that's the amendment that includes safety as an issue related to that would require the CPUC to just consider safety as it looks at rate making. I mean, they could look at it and consider it and do nothing with it, but it just gives them that authority and in that direction.
Okay,
Mr.
no,
Hudson?
I understand, but I look at the bill in two ways. There's what we're doing to increase safety and the requirements from safety planning, safety reporting, et cetera, and then the language of your bill as it relates to rate setting. And I think the actions that this committee has taken, not just in the past, but even earlier this year, we draw a fine line between what we do as a legislative committee versus the job of the commission as the rate setting body, and not sort of overreaching the delineation of the two.
And I agree with you, and that's why we crafted the language in such a way that just allows them to consider it as an issue. They don't have to do something with it at the end of the day, but they're the body that should be the body that looks at all of the issues and the opportunities, whether it's with the ability that they have through their integrity management plans that they require of the utilities to make sure that those are being followed properly and establishing those safety parameters. So it's how the utility may plan for safety in the future that could be and should be considered, or it should not be considered. It's up to the PUC. So that's the authority we're giving them that I think we should give them.
Obviously, the incident that brings this bill forward is the San Bruno incident. And I just think the commission would be hard-pressed to entertain anything with the name PG&E on it in the near term that doesn't have the San Bruno incident on their mind. Number one. Number two, I just don't know, maybe this will be the subject of committee dialogue, but what a fiduciary or legal definition of consider is, as we're inserting your language here to what the commission ought to consider during the rate-making process. So I just wanted to sort of point that out for the committee. Let me call up witnesses in support. Are there witnesses in support? And since the first is Mr. Randolph, maybe he can expand on what these additional considerations in rate-making specifically could mean to the PUC.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, Edward Randolph with the Public Utilities Commission. We are in support of this bill. I apologize. I just walked into the room through the chaos of outside, so I'm not quite sure the discussion that's occurred prior to me walking in.
But now that you're here,
well, what would you like me to expand upon?
Well, when the author is suggesting through the bill before us today that the commission consider a safety history of a utility in its rate-making process, what does that mean to the commission?
We're supportive to neutral on that language, and I'm not sure exactly what factors going forward would go into implementing the language there, except for the fact that we do think that that's something we already do have the authority to do if it were necessary at a certain time, and isn't really going to change dramatically the CPUC rate-making process, except to add one more list of criteria we'd consider in the rate cases.
You say you already have the authority.
We think on a case-by-case basis, if we were determining rate of return for capital investment, that the factors that the author is looking at is something that we would already potentially look at, not definitively look at.
Lenny Goldberg on behalf of TURN in support of the bill. We've been very sensitive to the rate-making issue as it came up in the Leno bill as well. The Commission has jurisdiction to disallow return when they have not done, when a utility has not done its job. At the same time, we think it is, and there's a long history of directions from the legislature with regard to what they may consider. Now, they have to do just and reasonable rates. They have to have a reasonable rate of return. But some direction from the legislature with regard to their history of safety, for example, would be taken advisedly by the Commission, and we support that.
Okay, next witness. Other witnesses in support? Are there witnesses in opposition?
Kent Kaus with Pacific Gas and Electric. We are in opposition to this one provision that we're talking about and supportive of many of the other provisions in the bill. We do fear that tying this regulation and tie between rate of return and safety record in the statute is problematic. As noted before, the PUC already has the authority to do so, and it's unclear what safety means. Does safety mean our driving record for people out in the blue trucks, or does safety mean OSHA? Does safety mean something else? It's unclear what it means. I think the Commission already has authority under state statute to fine a utility for noncompliance with whatever it is that they find we have been in violation of. Critics have mentioned that there has not been a great history of fines being assessed. We have a penalty proposal before the Public Utilities Commission now on another gas pipeline accident a couple of years back in Rancho Cordova that demonstrates the Commission's desire and interest in assessing fines and penalties when we violate the rules. The fear is if you tie it in statute to rate of return, you will dampen the interest of investors to invest in the utility and the infrastructure needs that we have going forward. And ask for that provision to be removed. Thank you.
Next witness.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. Cindy Howe with Southern California Gas Company and San Diego Gas and Electric. We have an opposed unless amended position on AB 56 and have been working with the author throughout this session to address issues that concern us greatly, and we still continue to have concerns. A couple things I think would be helpful in this discussion. Currently, the National Transportation Safety Board is continuing its investigation into San Bruno and the cause of San Bruno. We also have an OIR open at the CPUC that is looking to address a lot of issues surrounding the issues that came up with the San Bruno incident, including record keeping, including things that will address safety as well as the public's perception of our natural gas pipeline infrastructure. We also just had the report from the independent review panel that was established by the Commission, which in large part identified third-party activity as a primary cause for the instability of the pipeline in San Bruno. At the same time, that report cautions the legislature on reacting toward things or mandating things that will solely increase costs without increasing the level of safety of our pipeline infrastructure. This session, this committee has passed out SB 44, which addressed emergency response, and San Diego Gas and Electric, Southern California Gas Company supported that measure, as well as SB 216, which is something that the independent review panel indicated is something to look at, which is greater installation of remote control valves and automatic shutoff valves for our natural gas pipelines. We also, this committee also passed out SB 705 related to mandating a safety code, or safety plan. Thank you. Thank you. Lost my train of thought. A safety plan for the gas corporations to adopt, which looks at the a whole host of issues that are also being looked at the CPUC. So with all that the legislature has done, this committee has done, we question whether or not AB 56 isn't duplicative of those efforts, and we appreciate the amendments that the author accepted to make sure that the provisions in this bill are consistent with the bills that have already gone out of this committee. We have the specific concerns with the safety issue and the rate of return, as mentioned by PG&E, for the same reasons, noting that CPUC has plenty of authority to exact fines and penalties on utilities for failure to comply with rules, regulations, statutes, and they do that. The balancing account we note in our letter, but that should be addressed by making this consistent with your legislation, Chair, on SB 879. And lastly, there were some more clerical issues that we raised in the letter that are still critical, having to do with the frequency of the report. We'd suggest leaving it to the Commission to decide how frequently they want the report rather than specifying 6 months in statute. We also raise an issue related to how the language in the bill is consistent with the rate cases and how the rate cases go forward. The language requires the utility, the gas corporation, to propose rates in our rate cases. ignoring the fact that gas corporations do not propose rates in rate cases. We request a specific revenue requirement, which is then settled typically by other stakeholders and interveners in a rate case. And then it's the CPUC that authorizes the revenue requirement. So to the extent this legislation, this committee wishes to ensure that the gas corporation has sufficient revenues to address all the safety issues, that the onus be on the CPUC to authorize sufficient revenues. And then lastly, there's...
Lastly, twice.
I'm sorry. I'm wrapping up. The one other issue is that the new language requires pressure testing as well as verifiable documentation of all of our records. The purpose that the CPUC requires us to have and law requires us to have the documentation is to document the pressure test. So making that an or making it clear that the documentation is that we have a pressure test that would address, I think, the concern with regarding the establishing the maximum operating pressure of the lines. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are the witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, again, let me turn it to questions, comments from the committee, but sort of differentiating. I think a lot of the substantive policy questions and issues have been addressed with the acceptance of the suggested amendment in comment number 5 of the analysis. The rate setting piece, however, remains a question, and I'll expand on that after other members. Senator Corbett, followed by Senator Wright.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As you noted in the analysis, unfortunately, fortunately, many of us are working on this issue of pipeline safety. And unfortunately, though, as bills have moved along in the process, they've sort of morphed and pieces of bills have ended up in other people's bills. And I just wanted to touch on that subject for a moment. I thank Assemblymember Hill for his strong advocacy and ensuring that we have safe gas pipelines. It's something of great interest to myself, as many lines pass through the 10th Senate District as well, and I've been working on this issue. So I just wanted to make sure there were amendments taken to Assemblymember Hill's bill on May 18th, which basically adopted language of the bill that I'm carrying, SB 44. And Assemblymember Hill and I had the opportunity to speak several times, including over this weekend, to try to figure out how we would sort that all out. And I just wanted to make sure, in reading the analysis, it does state that at 5, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, that there are conflicts and that the suggestion is to, part of the suggestion is to strike the conflicting provisions from the bill entirely. So would that mean that the language from SB 44, the bill I've been carrying, the identical information would be then stricken from the Hill bill? Is that what that means?
Well, I'll defer to the author here to be abundantly clear on what his interpretation of the amendment is. It's his bill.
My interpretation of the amendment is that the language be consistent with the language of bills previously passed by this committee that deal with the same issue.
Okay. In their entirety, I mean, I don't know. Senator Corbett's referencing conversations that you and she had directly that I was not a part of. So
we were directed by the committee to maintain consistency of language. The issue that I introduced in this bill on December 6th, I believe, moved through the Assembly and is here, and I know Senator Corbett has language that was on the same issue, and we're following the direction of the committee.
I think there's some confusion here, and I think that was apparent in my conversations with Assemblymember Hill. Assemblymember Hill has stated that he's quite willing to assure that we work these issues out, that his bill doesn't then adopt my bill as his language. But, Mr. Chair, I was just trying to determine, you said that there are amendments, committee amendments, that you were asking him to take, and I don't want to ask him.
Comment number 5 of the analysis.
Yes, and it
I
says.
guess let me point out a slight difference between the substance of the amendments that speak to policy and the need for this committee to be consistent with
Yes.
previous actions, whether it was previous years or earlier this year. Now, if there's chaptering out issues or overlap issues in that regard, then at some point there's a way to
Yeah.
figure those out.
And-
I don't think there's any problem with making sure that there's conforming language. I don't have any problem with that. But there's specific language in the Hill bill which basically adopted a huge chunk of SB 44. So conformity is one thing, but striking language that's absolutely identical to another bill that's already moved out of this committee, I think should be of concern. And I just wanted to make sure, in reading your analysis, when you stated that these are amendments, it says striking conflicting provisions from the bill entirely. So I read this as you are asking that the identical language is stricken from this bill that already passed out of this committee in a previous bill. So I'm just, is that if that's what that does, I'm fine with that.
To be honest, Senator Corbett, that was not my interpretation. It was if there's language in multiple bills that speak to the same policy issue that are in conflict with one another, that should they both be signed into law, create a conflict, that's the conflict. If the language is consistent between multiple vehicles, then we have just sort of chaptering out or joining issues or more of a process or procedural item. If what you're suggesting is something different, let me ask you to kind of state what different.
Well,
course.
it's not quite that nuanced. There's language in the legislation, SB 44, you may remember when this bill came to committee, that specifically requires that information with regard to pipeline mapping and training and cooperation between first responders and the utilities that's the substance of the bill that I was carrying. And then in like I said, on May 18th, that almost identical language was imported into the Hill bill. So my concern is that this committee has already passed a bill with language. That's the entirety of my bill. Assemblymember Hill's bill does cover a few other things, and I would be glad for his bill to continue to include the training component. That might be something that we could take a look at. But I am very concerned that another bill, after a bill has moved out of a committee, has imported the exact language of another bill. And I'm just asking that the work that I have done be considered in your contemplation of this measure.
How I wish I could share that with our assembly colleagues when it comes to the public goods charge. But
Well,
but what,
that's another issue.
beyond what has been suggested through the analysis and what the author has agreed to or not agreed to, I have to defer to him on what he
Okay.
wants to do.
I think
with
he's trying
further
to
narrowing
please
or not
you.
narrowing his bill.
I think he's trying to please this committee and my conversations with him. He wants to make sure that the conformity is there.
As I mentioned to you, Senator, I'm fine with the conformity is there. The language can be anything we want. We can take the original language or find some conformity. It seems like I'm kind of in the middle here of trying to determine.
It's your bill.
I know, but I understand that. But it's trying to please the committee in terms of what you'd like to see in conformity, which I'm happy to do. And we can try to create some language that works for the Senator. But understanding you have issues, you have not issues, but you have a piece of this bill in your own legislation. I think Senator Yee has language related to automatic valves, and those bills are independent. And I think there's a way of working this out. I mean, we're happy to work with the Senator's office to come up with something in the committee.
Well, from what I heard from
Determine
Senator
language.
Corbett, there's overlap, consistency in language, but overlap between substance in your bill
Yes.
and her bill, which other members of the committee may or may not be fine with. What I hear from Senator Corbett is if, as it pertains to the overlap with her bill, the element of your bill, she would appreciate, correct me if I'm wrong, if you narrowed it specifically to the training components of that.
Mr. Chair, the overlap that you're talking about was passed through the Utilities Committee in the Assembly and passed through the Assembly as well. So
it's your call.
that bill is is in that language, and that bill is here, as just as I'm assuming these bills are moving in the other direction. So we can take the training provisions and do that as a key to it. That's fine.
And then I would be just want to make clear that you would then be striking the issues with regard to the emergency response plans and the mapping. The bills, when the bills first were moving on this issue, there were 3 separate bills with 3 separate subject matters, and unfortunately they've morphed over time. So would you be willing to strike the May 18th amendments to your bill, which overlap with my bill? That's what I'm asking specifically.
That's fine. I just wanted to get clarity on what your bill actually said.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So you'll be striking those measures. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Are there questions, comments from committee? Senator Wright, followed by Senator Berryhill.
I mean, here's a concern I have. Much of what is pipeline safety is actually regulated by the federal government and not the PUC. A great portion of what determines what you do with a pipeline, PUC has nothing to do with it. And if the federal government comes in and says you'll do X, they trump the PUC. So this is not the PUC's sole province to regulate. I think the process of tying the safety to the rate is illegal. If it's not, it should be, because you put the utility in a position where the federal government could require one thing, the PUC could require something else, and then the PUC could say, I'm going to ding your rate of return because you didn't follow our directive, even if that directive was diametrically opposed by the federal government. I can't support a bill that ties the two because they don't have anything to do with one another. The PUC sets fines. Fines are what happen to companies when they don't follow procedures. Rate is based on cost and another set of principles that don't have anything to do with whether or not they follow the safety rule. Safety rules are penalties because the company did something incorrectly. Has nothing to do with the rate of return, should be illegal. I believe it is illegal. It certainly violates the filed rate doctrine in the federal government, which does not allow them to do that. So I won't be supporting the bill that has any language that ties the safety record. Moreover, I think much of this is presumptive because we don't yet know what caused the issue in San Bruno. The federal government, who has the obligation, as a matter of fact, as you know, the federal government made everybody from the state get out of the way and say, we're the ones who do investigation on this. So there has been no state investigation because you don't get to do that. They will allow you to participate at a minimal level, but the determination of cause, the investigation is done by the federal government, not the state. That's why they made everybody from the state get out of the way and say, this is our jurisdiction now. We should probably wait, get that, because it may be that we want other legislation that's not contained in any of the bills because we're now acting before we even know what caused it, who was at fault, what responsibilities there were. I agree from what I've read, there were some record-keeping issues. There were certainly some issues, again, when you have pipelines, as I mentioned in this committee, in Los Angeles, we had a pipeline that was listed as 6 feet below ground, high-pressure line right on Overland at the 10 freeway. Well, the problem is that over the 50 years that pipe was there, the street dropped 2 feet. And no one kept up with the public works records. And so when a guy was there with a ditch witch that he set for 4.5 feet, there's a crater where he used to be, and the ditch witch and the guy were both gone. Sad day that it was, but there are things that happen in reality for record keeping, and we should make those things better. Should in that instance, do you find the city public works department who lowered the street? Do you find the utility for not keeping up with what the city was doing? I mean, that goes back and forth, and they're tragic. Lastly, I think handling natural gas is a business that's tough, and we should not assume and we should not tell people that it's without risk. More people die because of issues with water heaters and vents and a variety of things that cause death than they do in explosions. Obviously, explosions are more dramatic, but whether you die because you asphyxiated or whether you die because you got blown to smithereens, dead is dead. And I think the object is we want to make our systems as safe as we possibly can. And here we need to get the information, make sure that the information is consistent with the facts in the case. We don't yet have facts. We're reacting to the tragedy, and we don't have fact one. There's no conclusive report. We don't even have anybody that we can say you're responsible or you're at fault yet. So absent getting some of that to make sweeping changes, some of which I think violate federal law, I'm not prepared to do.
Sheriff, may I respond to this question? Thank you. Looking at the issue of federal regulation, it's the responsibility of the CPUC's Consumer Protection and Safety Division, which then has a utility safety and reliability branch that is charged with the enforcement of the federal law that's related to the federal pipeline safety regulations. So the state has a very large role in looking at pipeline safety and enforcing the safety rules. And I guess to respond to the issue of
that the federal government sets.
The federal government sets, that's correct. And all this bill does is ask and require the CPUC to consider safety as an issue. And safety should be an issue because we should expect our utilities to be operating, managing their pipelines in a safe manner. I mean, that is the expectation.
But that's a non sequitur. If the utility is not operating in a safe manner, they should be fined. And a fine under current law is not something that can be charged against rates.
And if they are acting in a safe manner, then they should be rewarded for that. Well, and that's what part of this would allow the CPUC to make that determination.
Actually, they should not be. If they're operating in a safe manner, that's what they should do. If they're operating in an unsafe manner, they should be fined. The issue of safety should not be a plus or a minus to the company's rate. If they're operating unsafely, they should be fined. If they're operating safely, that's what their charge was. And you're right, the PUC is the person who inspects and does the necessary review work on the pipeline. They don't set the regulation. The problem becomes is that a lot of people think that we can say, oh, this is going to be the standard. We've had things talking about valves that you place on the pipelines. It's not even clear that that's legal. First of all, there's no demonstrated thing that would have solved anything. There's no demonstrated thing that is legal, and there's no demonstrated thing that you put it on the pipeline that it doesn't cause other sets of problems. I think that what we should do in this instance is rely on people who do pipeline safety for a living. I'm not a pipeline engineer, neither are you. So again, I understand the issue of wanting to have something that you write. That's why what we should do is get the conclusive information so that we're not just throwing out information to say the things that we want to do. The federal government is still looking, and I trust that they will do a thorough job, and we will have a report. From that may come the need for some very specific legislation. We ain't at that point yet. We don't yet know right now conclusively what caused that pipeline to explode. Who was absolutely responsible for its explosion? Do you know?
There's considerable evidence pointing.
Evidence my foot. Do you know conclusively, yes or no?
No, I don't know,
Senator.
Then
that being the case, then we should wait and get it. There's evidence that the sky is going to fall next week, too. There was a guy who got $2 million because he said the earth was going to end on the 21st of May. It didn't. And now he's moved it back to October 21st. All I'm saying is that what we need to do is get conclusive information. And when we get it, then we can move forward in a way that allows us to move forward in a way that is legal and is following evidence. Anecdotal stuff goes forward all the time. I'm not prepared, for example, to make the same assertions about PG&E and SoCal Gas. They're two different companies. I don't want the same thing that happened in San Bruno because their safety records are different. There are other companies who do the same thing that are different. You're painting all the companies with the same brush, assuming that they're all unsafe. I don't make that assumption. And absent hard data, which we don't have, then I think this is presumption. I think the safety records are okay, but tying it to the rate, I'm a no. So leave it how you want it, but I'll be voting no.
Okay. Let me just, for clarification, we're all on the same page here. I think a lot of what Senator Wright has argued from a policy standpoint has been resolved with the amendment that you've already taken, conforming your bill with the substance and language of previous committee actions. But it still leaves out the question or concern about the first amendment recommended in analysis under comment 4 and how it's linked to rates or not. Senator Berryhill.
Yeah, thank you. And after Senator Wright, I don't want to continue to beat you up, Mr. Hill, because this bill does, I think, have great intent. But as I look at it, I'm looking at SB 44 Corbett, that I voted for. I'm looking at SB 216E that I voted for. I'm looking at the chairman bill. What was it? SB 879 that I voted for. I just think that there is a lot of duplicative language here. And the PUC and their testimony mentioned that they have the authority to make a lot of these determinations already. So for me, and I know you've talked to me, you've worked this bill very hard, and I appreciate your hard work, but I'm not going to be able to support it today. And but I do appreciate your hard work.
Thank you, Mr. Senator, and I appreciate that. And you can beat me up anytime.
Before you,
of course, thank you.
Before I ask you for a closing comment, since no other members of the committee are here, again, I appreciate the amendments that you've taken to align the language of your bill with other bills where you're sort of in the same space, and allows the committee to act today in a way that's consistent on a matter of policy, with the one exception, the linking of the safety record to the rate considerations. I think Senator Wright and others have articulated it well. There's other mechanisms, fiscal incentives and disincentives, punishments, if you will, for entities that are not in compliance from a safety perspective. And those that are, well, that's what they're supposed to be doing. So I think you've gotten the flavor for the committee of where the members may stand should you choose to accept that additional amendment or not.
Senator, I will accept that additional amendment.
Okay. And with
So
that,
we
I
can
will
keep
recommend
this,
to the committee, and I vote when the time comes.
This bill moving, and unfortunately, but I will accept it.
Okay. Well, we're still shy of a quorum, but when we achieve a quorum, I'll entertain a motion and recommend that I vote.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Senator Bradford, been popping in and out. He just missed his window. Assemblymember Gatto. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Senators. On behalf of my co-authors, Assembly Members Blumenfield, Galgiani, Gordon, Nistandi, Wagner, and Williams, I thank you for allowing me to present AB 306. First, we ought to go through the amendments. I've been working with this committee and the CEC to make the bill airtight. I thank you for your input. I have an author's amendment to clarify that the study called for in this bill is done competitively, and I'm also happy to take the amendment in the committee analysis to change the funding source, which I think should eliminate all opposition.
Okay. That would be under comment number 7 or 8 or both.
The one under comment 7, I think we can take as is, or I can take as is. The one in comment number 8 is one I'm not sure if inadvertently that eliminates schools from participating in the competitive bid process. I was told that language would only let this apply to the study to be done by businesses, and I'm not sure if that's, or I assume that's inadvertent, but I wanted to just clarify that the UC and Cal State could participate.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you clarify that your response to comment number 8?
So I was told that the words competitive bid process mean that it would only businesses could apply for the competitive bid, and I just wanted to the language that we had, which also includes other government agencies, would allow other government agencies, including the UC and Cal State system, to apply for the study.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Well, competitive bid is competitive bid. Maybe we can hear from the Energy Commission as they come forward as a witness to address your concern about whether public entities can competitively bid or not. But if there's no further presentation, let's go ahead and take witnesses in support.
I do have a presentation.
Oh, go ahead.
So, okay. So Thank you. If you've ever stood on a parking structure on a bridge where cars are driving over them, you've undoubtedly noticed that the whole structure vibrates. And our roads do the same thing. These little things are piezoelectric transducers. As you can see, they look like watch batteries. And recent advances in the technology allow us to embed these things in roads and under train tracks and capture the energy that would otherwise be lost as cars and trucks rumble down the road and turn them into electrical energy. An analogy can be made to hybrid vehicles. A hybrid vehicle simply captures the friction energy otherwise lost as a car brakes. This technology captures the energy lost as trucks rumble down the road and shake the roadway. In other words, these little transducers get a charge merely from the vibrations in the road. Piezoelectric technology is not new. The United States Navy has used this technology to generate sonar for years. Nor would California be the first government to test the technology. The nation of Israel has a road just outside Tel Aviv where this technology has been in place since 2009. The European Union similarly has authorized a stretch of the Italian autostrada to be fitted with the technology. Japan has outfitted the Tokyo Railway with this technology on a very small scale and uses the energy to power all displays and advertising in the rail stations. The fact that these other nations have implemented the technology should probably lend us to two conclusions. First, it should reassure the rightfully cautious among us that this is not an unproven technology. Second, it should challenge us a little bit because we in California often state that we're at the cutting edge of renewable technologies and recycling. So even though so many other nations are already using the technology, this bill would not require the state to do so. I thought that was a little too aggressive. This bill would just require us through the appropriate state entity, which is the CEC, to study the technology and make sure that it has application in California. Preliminary indications show that the electricity produced is half as costly as natural gas and a quarter as costly as wind or solar. The implantation of piezoelectrics, these little batteries in the road, do not change road feel. They don't change miles per gallon. They don't change anything. They can be placed in roads during regularly rescheduled repaving so we don't rip up any roads. A 1 mile stretch of road with just 2 lanes based on the road in Israel produces enough power to power 500 homes for a year or to charge 120 electrical vehicles in a day. So I'm not going to ask you today to consider all the wonderful uses for this technology, which might include in the future giving free power to those who live near freeways or diesel trucks rumbling the road during the day and allowing electrical vehicles to get the charge at night, or even turning Caltrans into a revenue generator, or even the job creation ramifications of this bill. But I do think that we should study this technology. I think it's worthwhile for our state to study this technology and have the experts at the Energy Commission tell us all the neat uses and benefits of the technology. California is a state crisscrossed with roads. There's a good chance we can add those roads into the inventory of assets that produce energy. So I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Witnesses in support.
David Quintana on behalf of Innowatek. We're an Israeli company which is involved in the manufacture of component parts for this technology. We're in support of the author's bill. Any research which can move this technology forward in California, we believe is a good thing.
Thank you.
Good morning, Michelle Hook on behalf of the Sierra Club California. We strongly support this bill.
Thank you. Next witness.
My name is Chibin Pei, Professor of Material Science and Engineering, University of California, Los Angeles. I'm here also to express my strong support for this bill. And this bill would require the California Energy Commission to research piezo-based energy harvesting technology. Piezo-based energy could provide a means of using the transportation infrastructure to offset vehicle emissions and help California reach its goal of getting 33% of its energy from renewable sources by 2020. As a researcher myself, who studies the harnessing of energy using piezoelectric materials, I feel it's deeply important for the state to add piezo-based energy to the current mix of renewable energy sources. Such research would promote the intellectual inquiry and energy research which will be necessary for securing our state's economic and environmental future. Harnessing the energy of road vibration could be an innovative way to reach our energy goals without any significant disruption to our way of life. And also that piezo-based energy holds important promise for the future. And there is a real promise in seeking to harness energy from everyday vehicular movement. As my research can attest that there is a great value in searching for solutions to our energy needs in ways that many may at first glance seem somewhat unorthodox. And however, we must remember that the path of scientific inquiry and technological achievement always seems that way at first. So for those reasons, I urge you to support this proposition. And furthermore, I'm here hopefully to be able to answer some of your technical questions you have about the scientific principles upon which this research is based.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in support? Witnesses in support? If not, let's hear from witnesses in opposition.
Not opposition, but
Why don't I save the best for last?
Russell Lowry with Pacific Gas and Electric. Our opposition was based on the changes to the peer process, which the author was kind enough to address in his amendment, so we're removing our opposition to the bill.
Okay, thank you. Next witness.
Thank you, Kelly Boyd with Southern California Edison. We are also withdrawing based on the amendments. Thank you.
And you're referring to which amendment specifically?
The funding amendments. Our objection was to bypassing the peer process. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Heidi Barcelli on behalf of Semper Energy Utilities. We're in the same position. We'll be removing opposition.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, okay, let's call forward the tweener. And I don't know if it's there's something you want to share, or you're just responding to the question that's been raised about competitive, or both. Okay, please do.
Good morning, Robin Smutney-Jones, California Energy Commission. I have Mike Gravely with me here from the Peer Division, and it was suggested to us we might be helpful to answer some questions. And one of the things that we'd like to clear up with regard to having the competitive bid provision placed in the bill is that UCs cannot compete with private vendors. So we might suggest that in order to offer flexibility for the Commission, in the event that if you want to go down this road and require us to do this research, we have some flexibility so that if we could do a competitive solicitation for private vendors, but would have the flexibility to go the UC route if we needed that. And that's, as you know, is the interagency agreement.
Okay, so
Well, I'm happy with that if that pleases the committee.
Yeah, I think that's our understanding here, so we want to get that clarification. There's a competitive bid process for private entities seeking to compete for some of the money, some of the funding. As has been clarified, entities like the UC don't compete with the private sector, but it's certainly allowable under the interagency components of how the Energy Commission grants awards. UC system, state entity, Energy Commission, state entity. Heaven forbid we're actually working together on this stuff. So I think your primary concern is our public entities sort of ineligible to participate, if you will. I think we've clarified that that's not the case. So if that's our mutual understanding.
Do we need the language in there that states interagencies may? Because that's how we had proposed it. We just added on to the competitive bid amendment with the language also interagencies and other state governments may. The
Commission has the authority.
We do.
That's what we're
we do.
That's what we're
as long as it's not restricted to a competitive bid, then we're okay.
Right. So that's sort of one
issue.
Item to clarify. Did you have anything else you wanted to offer today?
Just scratching my head a little bit over I don't know if the committee made the decision, I didn't quite catch that, moving the funding source to the RRTF. As you well know, this whole PGC bucket system is being revamped, and the research itself would really need to be done by the peer folks. So I find it, a little awkward that maybe the funding source comes from RRTF.
Well, I'll tell you why I find it a little awkward. We have a proposal, in part legislatively, in larger part the arguments for the legislation, that there's this amazing technology out there and we should sink research money into it. And as part of selling the bill, it's already in practice in Europe, it's already in use in Israel. If it's already being utilized elsewhere, it seems to me, and to use your words, Senator Brigado, this isn't an unproven technology. If it's already proven, what's the research that's necessary? And so therefore, should it be peer funding, or If it's just something that we need to certify and is an allowable technology in California, well, then maybe another source of funding would be more appropriate. And if part of the pitch here is alternative technologies or somehow qualified as renewable, I think that's part of what we're looking at the Resource Trust Fund for that. More importantly, I think, is the allowing of the Energy Commission to invest in this particular type of technology versus a mandate, peer or otherwise. When the legislature starts dictating, you shall grant this research award for this, whether it's company or this technology, I think bypasses the structure and the process that's been set up for that particular reason. And I think the adoption of the amendments, and that's my understanding from the author, addresses those significant policy concerns. The last question I had for the Energy Commission at this time is, to your understanding, does the Energy Commission already grant, has the Commission already granted funds for this type of technology?
Yes, I'll let Mike speak to it. We've done some technology research at the sort of microwatt level, and he can go through with you a little bit about what that is and how it does or does not lend itself to this more macro technology effort.
In 60 seconds or less?
Yes, so Mike Gravely, sir, from the PEER program, and yes, the description is in your handout is correct. We have done research over the last 8 years. It's primarily been focused in our research area of demand response and finding ways for commercial buildings and residential homes to participate more actively in demand response. The piezoelectric technology is used as an energy source. Ideally, the analogy would have sensors and communication devices on the wall, and the vibration from the wall would charge the system. So unlike a battery that expires, it would continue to get recharged. So we have done some research at a student level and a professor level. To my knowledge, there's been no commercial products yet, but the technology has been evaluated at a small scale. In relationships for size, it's the size of a dime as compared to the size of a refrigerator for the system that would work in a normal system to work on the grid. The technology from our research does seem to work, and the indication would be difficult for us to speculate how it would work at such a large scale, other than the fact that it has been successfully performed, and we do consider it a technology that we are pursuing further applications for at the small scale.
Questions, comments from committee? Senator Pavley.
Yes, thank you. I just, one comment and one question. Let's start with the question. I was a little bit confused on how you divide the private bid process versus a grant. In the analysis, they said research award can be made only by a competitive bid process. Now, a UC can't compete with the private sector on a competitive bid process. Are only competitive bid processes for the private companies, and the other is a grant? So if an amendment's taken to say only through a competitive bid process, doesn't that, in effect, if it's specific in the bill, make it just for the private sector, not a grant to a UC? Or were you suggesting that it just not make any mention of it because you have the authority anyway to do two separate things? I just didn't want to indirectly, because words do matter here, exclude the UCs because we're using competitive bid process.
I thank you. I appreciate that. That was exactly the point. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that either would work. If you're silent, we would be able to do either a competitive process with the private sector or an interagency agreement.
Well, let's not be silent about it. Let's be specific.
Okay.
That latitude, that flexibility exists for the Energy Commission under the PEER program, but not necessarily for RRTF. By accepting Amendment number 7 and RRTF as a source of funding, I think our action today is clearly telling the Energy Commission they have that latitude for this type of an award under RRTF.
Pleases the chair. So our amendment. So I heard the same thing, Senator Pavley. So I think the proposal.
I was just confused.
Paragraph 7 or paragraph 8 rather, says that research award under this section can only be made by a competitive bid process. just to be specific, because I'm with the chair, I prefer to be specific. I think we're trying to provide the assurance that this is a competitive process, and we're trying to provide the assurance that this is going to go out to bid. So I would prefer language that says, under this section, through competitive solicitations, interagency agreements, or agreements with other government entities.
Sorry, say it again.
So I would prefer language that reads, through competitive solicitations, interagency agreements, or agreements with other governmental entities. That way we make it clear that they may go through other governmental entities that might be able to do it cheaper than.
So they can just have UC continue to do it if they want.
Okay, you know what? That's fine. I think we've had a sufficient conversation about it to be clear what our intent is here, and we'll just leave it to staff after they do the fine tuning on the language.
Thank you.
Senator Pavlik.
Thank you. The other question is, if the peer funding is not available for this, according to the amendments, are we limited exclusively to the Renewable Resources Trust Fund, or are there other options out there, AB 118 or whatever? No, I just wanted to be clear, because Renewable Trust Fund is...
I don't think you want to put the author back through that roller coaster that he's ridden all legislative session.
I'll give some history on that, and I appreciate your comment about the roller coaster.
I didn't know if it was restricted or you're fine.
Yeah. I'm totally agnostic on the funding source. I just don't want to burden the general fund during these times. Yeah. There's a number of funds that exist just for this purpose. AB 118 would be fine. The other one would be fine. I just want something that can actually move forward. So whatever pleases. The origin of that, we were suggested to put it in peer by back in one assembly committee. And
may I ask that of the Energy Commission?
Well, you can. I think one of the overarching questions here is whether there's going to be a peer program or peer program equivalent of public goods charge to fund it after this year. I think my expectation is that it would be, but it's not certain.
I didn't know if there were other options than just the Renewable Resource Trust Fund, and how that accounts.
But the ideal option would be private capital, but short of that, we're trying here, both on funds that have a balance, but more importantly, appropriate uses.
May I direct that to Ms. Jones?
Go ahead.
I think what I'd like to point out is the RRTF fund balance is uncertain. It's strained. It has a lot of incoming straws into it from other proposals before this body. In fact, now we're going through a process to dissect some awards to a small wind program, which is proving problematic, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. There are also some restrictions with the RRTF that I'd have to go back and talk with my legal counsel about, such as the money can only be spent in IOU territories. That may or may not be problematic. So there's things would want to go back and research, but given that if the technology is proven and we use it for more deployment, demonstration type things, then that fund begins to fit more. If it's basic research, it fits with peer. I guess the ideal world would be we'd have flexibility between the two funds, if this is the wish of the body.
And I'll be making a donation to the RRTF after this.
And just going back to my point about the legislature shouldn't be in the position of dictating or being that prescriptive. We're through this action, allowing it, let the Energy Commission make the determination through the more appropriate process to vet it.
We don't have a quorum, do we?
Yes, we do. Let's call for a quorum.
Padilla?
Here.
Padilla here. Fuller? Berryhill?
Here.
Berryhill here. Corbett? De Leon? De Leon here. DeSaulnier? Pavley?
Here.
Pavley here. Rubio?
Here.
Rubio here. Simidian? Strickland?
Here.
Strickland here. Wright.
And I would like to move the bill.
Okay, move the bill as amended.
And be a co-author for amending it. Yes.
Okay, and since we're amending, let's
Thank you. Be happy to take you as a co-author.
Mr. Chair.
Did you want to close?
Mr. Chair,
yeah,
actually for the close, I'm getting here a little late. I hear there's a motion do pass as amended. Could you clarify what that amendment is exactly?
Sure. So the amendments that we're taking are the one. If you look in the analysis, we're We're taking the one in number 7,
What page
which
in the
moves this.
analysis,
This is
Mr.
page
Chairman?
5 of the analysis. So we're moving the funding source from PEER to the RRTF, and then in number 8 we have a very, very similar amendment, but that just clarifies that schools can be eligible to the process, the grant process as well.
All right, so the peer money's left alone, and you're going specifically to which fund again?
Renewable Resources Trust Fund.
Okay, okay, that's fine.
Senator Strickland.
I would just like to add co-author since you're amending the bill as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do pass as amended. Please call the roll.
Padilla.
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Fuller. Berryhill.
Aye.
Berryhill, aye. Corbett. De Leon. De Leon, aye. DeSaulnier. Pavley.
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Rubio.
Aye.
Rubio, aye. Semidian. Strickland.
Aye.
Strickland, aye. Wright.
Okay, we'll place that bill on call. Allow absent members to add on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, members. The committee previously heard item number 1, AB 56 by Assemblymember Hill. An appropriate motion at this time would be to pass as amended. Assemblymember Hill accepted both proposed amendments in the analysis as author's amendments. Is there a motion? Senator Rubio moves. Let's call the roll.
Padilla.
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Fuller. Berryhill.
No.
Berryhill, no. Corbett. De Leon. DeSaulnier. Pavley. Rubio. Rubio, aye. Semidian. Strickland. Wright. Pavley, aye.
3-1.
Okay, that vote is 3-1. We'll put that bill on call and invite forward Assemblymember Bradford. Thank you for your patience this morning. Multitasking.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here to present AB 1386. It's a supplier diversity reporting bill as it relates to the cable and satellite industry. As you know, the state and federal government has made a commitment to priorities for investment of infrastructure in underserved communities, making billions of dollars of grants and loans available to help achieve that goal. Cable companies have made a tremendous infrastructure investment throughout these communities in the broadband service and direct broadcast providers is also supporting the broadband application have begun the penetration to government. To petition the government for the opportunity to compete for these funds. The state and federal government makes these funds available to expand broadband services. It is important that we encourage companies that will benefit from these funds to provide contract opportunities for small-owned businesses by women, minorities, and disabled veterans. This is essential to California's economy, understanding that 50% of the population is women, and we're a majority state of 60% of people of color, so it's important that we capture this audience and this contracting procurement opportunity. This bill is just simply an expansion of GO 156 that was passed by Ms. Moore some 25 years ago to include women, minority-owned businesses, and veteran-owned businesses in the procurement process with the utilities. They have made great strides. Many of these companies have reached 23% of their procurement targeted toward these businesses. This is a great opportunity. This bill only makes it voluntary that the cable companies, satellite companies report voluntarily their procurement efforts and outreach to minority and disabled businesses. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the bill. Do we have witnesses in support?
Mr. Chair,
support the bill. Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, we have a motion by Senator De Leon. Any questions, comments from committee? Seeing none, let's open the roll.
Padilla.
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Fuller. Berryhill. Corbett. De Leon. De Leon, aye. DeSaulnier. Pavley. Pavley, aye. Rubio. Rubio, aye. Semidian. Strickland. Wright. Wright, aye. Needs one more.
Okay, needs one more vote, but we'll put that bill on call. Allow absent members to add on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Fuentes. This is AB 1073, item number 8 on our agenda.
Mr. Chair, members,
Let me begin by accepting the committee's suggested amendments reflected in points 3 and 4 to make certain we don't conflict with the Pavley legislation. So I want to thank the analysis for pointing that out. This bill provides additional accountability over ratepayer-funded energy efficiency program funds by requiring applications for energy efficiency rebates to include a copy of the building permit associated with the rebate. A simple bill. Under existing law, state and local building codes govern energy efficiency construction projects. In order to incentivize these projects, rebates are provided to ease the financial burden that comes with the construction upgrades that reduce energy consumption. Recently, contractors and consumers have lodged complaints with the California Energy Commission about violations of the state's building and appliance energy efficiency standards. A recent analysis indicates that proper permits are obtained in less than 10% of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning replacements in existing buildings as required. Similar data has been found for re-roofing projects. Lacking appropriate permitting, many contractors avoid compliance with efficiency regulations. It also puts contractors who comply with the law at a competitive disadvantage compared to those who do not obtain a permit. With limited resources, it's important to ensure that energy efficiency projects are done according to the proper standards. Today, I have not Eduardo Martinez, but Scott Wetch on behalf of the Western States Council of Sheet Metal Workers to testify in support, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Witnesses?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Member Scott Wetch on behalf of the Western States Council of Sheet Metal Workers, sponsor of the bill. Title 24 requires that when folks do major repairs and retrofits of heating and air conditioning systems, that they have a third-party HERS certified independent verifier come and test the system to ensure that it meets the state's Title 24 standards. What we found is unscrupulous contractors are out undercutting the state Title 24 requirements by not pulling building permits, thereby not doing all the testing and verifying that needs to make sure that we meet the standards that were set actually by this body. And so we think this will be a choking point that will help put an end to that practice, and we'd urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Next witness.
Chair and members, Dan Shaw with the California Public Utilities Commission. The Commission voted unanimously to support AB 1073. Studies have shown that actually obtaining an HVAC permit, for example, actually leads to incremental energy savings. We do remain concerned, however, that one unintended consequence of the bill would be potentially lower participation and thus fewer energy savings from utility programs, in part because an incentive amount will only offset a small portion of the cost of actually obtaining the permit. But having said that, we do support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness. The witnesses in support. Any witnesses in opposition?
Move the bill.
Seeing none. Questions, comments from committee. We have a motion. Let's call the roll.
Padilla.
Aye.
Padilla, aye. Fuller. Berryhill. Corbett. De Leon. De Leon, aye. DeSaulnier. DeSaulnier, aye. Pavley. Pavley, aye. Rubio. Rubio, aye. Semidian. Strickland. Wright. Wright, aye. 6-0.
As sufficient votes, we'll leave it on call for absent members to add on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Do you have any other authors in the audience? If not, then we'll wait patiently.
Nobody wanted to come?
I think you should kill bills when people don't show up and there's downtime.
Occasionally happens to us.
I'll be back.
Is there a cat loose in here?
Is it what?
I heard some singing. Where did you spend your weekend, Senator?
You know what, Mike?
If I can ask for your attention for just 1 second, we've just been advised that item number 6, AB 976 by Assemblymember Hall, is going to be a 2-year bill. So we will remove that item from consideration on today's agenda. Some members Ma, Torres, Huffman, Buchanan, or Bettis, please make your way to Senate Energy. Okay, welcome back. Let's welcome Assemblymember Torres to present on item number 4, AB 770.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm pleased to present you Assembly Bill 770, an important bill to improve the 911 system. Assembly Bill 770 addresses a very important dimension of the 911 emergency system, which is training and recruitment of emergency personnel. 911 dispatchers perform a vital function in the law enforcement public safety system. Dispatchers are the first point of contact in receiving calls regarding crimes, traffic accidents, medical emergencies, safety hazards, and other requests for service. Answering 911 calls can be a very highly stressful occupation and demands precise performance in order to effectively relay calls to the appropriate response entity. I'm going to share with you a story, a personal experience while working the 911 system in Los Angeles. I was in charge of monitoring the work of 5 dispatchers working 6 different frequencies. One of the units went into pursuit. My job was to coordinate those emergencies with other allied agencies, coordinating with CHP. While the pursuit went into an outside agency, into another city, I called that city and began to provide details about the termination of the pursuit that ended with the suspects running into a 7-Eleven in the city. The dispatcher that answered the line was a little bit hysterical about what was going on. It was a very difficult situation because there were hostages, not only customers, but the people working inside of the 7-Eleven. At that time, I decided I was a highly trained dispatcher in the city of LA. I decided to perform the duties that should have been performed by this other person. I dialed 411 and requested the telephone number to the store. I got that phone number, dialed the store, and spoke to the clerk. The clerk informed me that he had a handgun to his head and that there were 2 people inside the store. While I coordinated all of those activities with my police officers at the scene, we were able, through the work of the SWAT team, we were able to save everyone inside of the store. That's an example of good training and what can happen when an emergency occurs and people are not prepared to do their work. The demands of the job are very stressful, and the vacancy rate is about 20%. Assembly Bill 770 uses the existing structure of the 911 Advisory Board to provide focus on training and recruitment issues. The bill adds a member of post commission and the state fire marshal to the 911 Advisory Board and directs the Advisory Board to only consider training and recruitment issues. Specifically, the bill asks the Advisory Board to consider the issues of standardized training for 911 dispatchers, issues related to answering calls in a language other than English, and recruitment and training of multilingual dispatchers. I ask for your aye vote.
Okay. We'll have a couple questions for you, but let's hear from witnesses first. Witnesses in support?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm Alan Deal, representing the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. The Commission has taken a support position for this bill. The Commission is responsible for the selection and training standards of public safety dispatchers who are part of the POST program, roughly 8,000 who service law enforcement agencies throughout the state, which, as the analysis says, does not represent all of the various kinds of public safety dispatchers that this bill addresses. But the Commission does support this bill.
Okay. Are there witnesses in support? We have witnesses in opposition.
Mr. Chair and members, Rob Gross-Glaser representing the California chapter of the National Emergency Number Association, CalNENA, we commonly refer to ourselves as. We respect the author very much, but regretfully oppose this legislation. We agree that training and standards are absolutely essential, but we believe that they should not be mandatory standards dictated through the CTA, but they should be tailored to be the most effective and efficient standards for each local public safety answering point. I can go into further details, but for brevity purposes, we oppose based on that and believe that the CENTNA funds used for this purpose should not go towards a mandatory standard establishment, but for other purposes outlined currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other witnesses in opposition? Seeing none, let's begin with questions. My first question to the author is there's two recommended amendments in the analysis. And just for clarity, for the committee's consideration, are you taking one or both, or?
No, I am not. No, I am not. The bill, as is written, does not mandate training standards for dispatchers. I want to be very clear that while I appreciate them being here to oppose the bill, for over 35 years since the 911 system was created, there has not been any emphasis placed to have minimal training standards, if not for POST in recent years that has gone above and beyond, their call to duty to provide training standards for peace officers. This is a position of civilian dispatchers that has been ignored for far too long.
Okay, so the follow-up question then is if the training is not mandatory.
No.
Then your objections to comment number 5 and the recommended amendment, just to clarify whether the training standards to be established when recommendations come forward are mandatory, or there can simply be a recommendation for consideration.
There are two questions that are asked in this bill. One, should there be standards? And the answer to that, as someone who has spent 18 and a half years and trained other dispatchers, absolutely, there ought to be standards. And should those standards be mandatory? That question is silent. I'm not asking for that in this bill. I would say that we leave that to the advisory board to recommend whether they should be standard, training should be mandatory, or should they be simply recommended.
Okay. We have questions, comments from other members of the committee? Nope. Do we have a motion? Okay. We'll continue to wait a motion. There's members that are absent at this time.
Great. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have another member ready to present, another author? Assemblymember Pettis, about on time. You're up.
Good morning, Senators. This is AB 1150, the SCHIP extension. The
The self-generation incentive program is a necessary incentive to encourage investments in clean, distributed energy resources. This program provides incentives to support existing, new, and emerging distributed energy technologies installed on the customer side of the utility meter. Qualifying projects include wind turbines, fuel cells, and combined heat and power technologies. Specifically, this bill extends for 1 year through 2012 the PUC's authority to collect needed revenues, $83 million, so that the SCHIP program can continue assisting in the continued deployment of renewable distributed generation technologies in the state. Given the governor's distributed generation goal, 12,000 megawatts, and the increased commercial utilization of these technologies, stakeholders have raised a question to my office about whether the collection of funds should be extended beyond just 1 year. I believe a discussion on this topic has merit, so long as appropriate program controls and reforms are in place. The California Public Utilities Commission currently has an open proceeding to reform major elements of this program. CPUC staff has proposed reforms that include performance-based incentives and equitable distribution of funding to ensure diverse technology deployments and to maximize the number of technologies that can be funded. My office has been closely monitoring that proceeding, and it is my understanding that this decision is expected in a few weeks. AB 1150 will also serve as an accountability vehicle to ensure that the CPUC's reform efforts are adequate and fair for California's ratepayers, while also ensuring that California remain at the forefront of our nation's green job and economy movement. Thank you for listening to our presentation, and I respectfully ask for your vote.
Okay, we'll certainly have questions, but let's hear from witnesses first. Witnesses in support.
Hello, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Committee. I'm Matt Wilson with Foundation Wind Power. We build 100% renewable generation on-site at large energy consumers throughout California. Our customers include Safeway, Budweiser, Inland Empire Utility Agency, Tykert Materials. Because of this program, we are able to sell electricity at a discount to the utility rate. All ratepayers receive some benefit from this program because this is clean generation. It's good for the environment and good for all people. These employers create business activities for all Californians. Our projects create approximately 10 jobs per project. It's efficient transmission. It's on-site transmission. There is no line loss. Governor Brown's focus on distributed generation and 12,000 megawatt goal. Large energy consumers pay into the CSI program and other public benefits programs disproportionately. We are sponsoring AB 1150 to mend and extend the SGIP program. We need a net level playing field so multiple developers and technologies can participate, not just one. Our projects have long lead times, and we need some predictability to the program to justify our business. Thank you.
Before the next witness goes, a quick question. You mentioned that you're supporting the bill because it will amend and extend the current program. I read the extension part of the bill. Where's the mending part of the program?
We believe the California Public Utilities Commission is actually
the commission will be, we hope, will be doing some mending. This bill doesn't do any mending.
That's correct.
Yeah, correct.
Policy.
Correct, Senator.
Next witness, please.
Hi, my name is Mick Scavarlo. I'm with Lucas Advocates here on behalf of United Technologies Corporation and their wholly owned subsidiary UTC Power, which is a manufacturer of fuel cells with combined heating and power. SCHIP's an important program to UTC Power in terms of getting the technology marketable and deployed throughout the state of California. And as the more installations we get, the cheaper we're allowed to produce the product. And that line is in progress, and each installation is getting cheaper. And the self-generation incentive program has provided significant benefits in that regard. We do believe that the extension needs to go beyond 1 year to send the right market signal. This program's kind of has stop-go with it, and the market signal around 5 years would be appropriate to allow us to have clean transition into whatever the next thing is for the distributed generation in terms of the governor's clean energy plan and things along those lines. The diversity of technologies available to receive the incentive allow the customers diversity and their operations and something that's appropriate for them. And we think that this is one of the only incentives for these types of technologies, and it's important to continue that extension.
Next witness, please.
Chris Rosa on behalf of the Silicon Valley Leadership Group in support.
Thank you. I see we have a line of witnesses. Let's invite everybody in support to come forward.
Mr. Chair and members, Dan Shaw with the California Public Utilities Commission. The Commission voted unanimously to support this bill, and in fact, it was the prior version with a 3-year extension in which the Commission voted to support. So we would certainly support a longer extension if that came about. I would note, as the Assemblyman has mentioned, we are set to release a proposed decision on SB 412, Senator Kehoe's bill, soon. Hopefully this month. We realize that folks have been waiting for that for quite some time. It's been a very, very lengthy proceeding, very complicated proceeding, and we are hopeful that it will address many of the concerns that were raised in the analysis in terms of the need for reform and the expectation that the participant actually produce results and energy that actually, the energy they produce is actually getting confused here, is paying for performance, is what I meant to say. So for those reasons, the Commission supports this bill.
So you'll stick around to have that lengthier discussion under AB 864?
Absolutely.
Okay. And any sneak preview on that proposed decision, since all eyes are on you guys to mend this thing?
Well, I would only turn to the suggest you review the committee review the staff proposals that have been released. Performance-based incentives, a 70 to 80% reduction in incentive payments, a cap on total incentives per project, or a cost share requirement, either a ban on out-of-state biogas or requirements to increase the renewable content of out-of-state biogas for a longer period of time. We realize that has been the subject of considerable controversy. And among other things, an annual cap on incentives that any single provider, technology provider, or contractor would be eligible for.
Okay. Thank you. Next witness.
Michelle Hook.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before I let you go, Senator Rubio.
You mentioned the CPUC endorsing the bill or supporting it for 3 years rather than the 1 year. From the PUC's standpoint, do you see any downside moving towards the 1 year? I've got a question for the author as to why it was limited from 3 years to 1. But from your perspective, would it change your position? And do you see the ability of the PUC to operate any differently with it being extended 1 year versus 3?
Senator, it wouldn't change our position. We would continue to support the bill. We expect, even with a 1 year extension, we expect next year a member to come back and propose further extensions. So the market certainty is an important factor. I mean, this sort of suggests that the need for participants to be able to factor this longevity of the program into their business decisions is an important consideration.
Does it hamstring you at all, though, in terms of planning long term? You're authorized to have this program run until 2015. If it's a 1 year going through this process every single 12 months, does it inhibit you at all at the PUC to plan long term as to what this program may shape up in the next 4 years?
Actually, I think the program administration sunset goes to 2016, I believe. But to the extent that there are no funds available to administer, that would certainly hamper, implementation of the program. We believe that the reforms that are proposed by staff, at least pursuant to SB 412, are significant and very important, and should be given, an opportunity to play out.
Senator Wright, of this witness.
Yeah, I mean, the things that I'm looking at the analysis, and there's 83 million, an additional fund. What are we subsidizing in the program now? Help me understand that.
The SB 412 authorized that amount through the end of this year on an annual basis.
But what are we subsidizing? I'm not asking if we. What are we subsidizing? What are we giving money for?
Currently, the money is to offset installation costs. Is to offset. It provides an upfront capacity payment to offset the costs of equipment purchase, installation. That is a subsidy.
Okay. Okay.
Next witness.
Michelle Hook on behalf of the Sierra Club California. We strongly support this bill.
Thank you. Next witness, please. Witnesses in support, keep coming.
Thank you, Chair and members. Dorothy Rothrock, California Manufacturers and Technology Association. We're strongly in support of the SCHIP program. We think that policies will encourage companies to adopt technologies and self-generation and distributed generation that will get us to our AB 32 goals, and we need all the help we can get. Thank you.
Next witness, please.
Hi, Tracy Reed, Fuel Cell Energy. I just want to add a little bit of a comment we are supporting, and just to add a little bit, these projects we're looking at take 18 to 24 months on average to develop, and in order to get those projects developed and secure third-party financing for these projects, the extension would be appreciated. Ask for your support. Thank you.
Next witness, please.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Don Liddell. I represent the California Energy Storage Alliance, or CESA for short. That is a group that represents 38 companies that are actively involved in the business of energy storage, developing projects. It also includes a number of large and small solar developers and wind developers. So it's a diverse group. Its purposes are to advance the deployment of energy storage, generally speaking. And that means that it's technology neutral. It doesn't favor pumped storage over batteries or anything else. We have examples of virtually every technology available in our membership at the moment. And we are also business model neutral. We support utility ownership. We support third-party ownership, customer ownership. It doesn't matter. We support all of them. And the position of the CESA is that we support the bill if amended.
Thank you. Further witnesses in support?
Dan Call, Human Concerned Scientist. We appreciate the authors bringing forward this bill. We urge support for the bill.
Senator Wright, do you have a question?
To the witness from CESA, what amendment do you want?
Two. Okay. Thank you for asking.
Amendments, okay.
Two. First, we agree with the previous witnesses that the longer the extension, the better. Year by year is just not a good idea for a variety of reasons. So the longer the better. 5 years would be good. Secondly, we request an amendment that was in the bill in the Assembly but taken out by the appropriations, which would explicitly call out that storage, standalone, coupled with energy resources of any description, including solar, would qualify. It's our belief that that is likely to happen, but we're not certain that it'll happen with the PUC. And we think that it was the original intent of 411 that it be that way. We've argued that way consistently. So our Second Amendment request is that the bill be amended to slightly clarify the point that energy storage is a qualifying technology. Those are the two amendments.
Let me ask, we had a discussion in this committee about storage once before, and at that point we were looking at about an 11 cents base cost for storage plus what you put in it. Where is that? That was about a year. Actually, I guess we had been discussing in 09 in this Kehoe's bill. Is that still about the cost? Or?
To some extent it is, but it's important to recognize that storage depends entirely upon the application that you're using it for. Mm-hmm. A large, massive pump storage, hydro storage project is going to have a certain cost profile, a very advanced, high-tech form of battery is going to have a totally different one. So there's a spectrum of cost. And yes, the answer is that there's going to be some technology that's still that number, but there's going to be higher and there's going to be lower. And the reason for wanting to have this bill extended and clarified is to be sure that it's there for the companies that need it. Many of our members are startups, and they're not going to make it without this incentive. They need it. They've been waiting for it for a long time. So the answer to your question is yes, but it's not a precise number because it varies rather considerably in terms of the application. That question is before the PUC in a separate proceeding right now. The energy storage proceeding is considering cost effectiveness generically and how it ought to be employed in different applications. That's in 2514 implementation for the energy storage bill that was supported by the Brown administration. That's going to take a couple of years to get to that point. It started now. It's very active, but it's exactly your question because it's fundamental. No one wants storage for storage's sake.
Here's here's a concern I have.
Sure.
If we take an 11-cent battery, and I'm just going to call it a battery because storage sounds like something out of Star Trek. If I take an 11-cent battery and then I put 20-something cents wind into it, now I'm at 30-something cents. The problem is that the cost of the storage goes on top of whatever you put in it. So if I'm doing pump storage, the upside of that is that I can use some cheap energy and pump it up. It'll last indefinitely until I release it, so I can control when I get it back, which is one of the advantages of storage. The challenge I have is that as I'm looking at the technologies that we're moving forward, everybody who's bringing the technologies needs a subsidy. By definition, it means that it's something wrong with it to me. If it was like, I don't need to subsidize Rolls Royces. The guy who wants to buy it can afford it, and the guy who can't doesn't. Rolls Royces are on back order. I don't need to subsidize Cadillacs too much, other than General Motors going bankrupt. My challenge is that all these technologies come forward and say, I only need this subsidy. So then it begs the question, if your thing worked, why don't people buy it on their own? If it really delivered what you said, then people would buy it and pay for it themselves because it's a value. The challenge that I'm having is that every time one of these things shows up, I'm going to the ratepayer and asking the ratepayer, I need you to give me more money. So in this case, we had storage, we had wind, we were looking at what becomes very expensive power that nobody in his or her right mind would have paid for other than the fact that it was being subsidized. So my concern is I'm looking at, and I tell you my own bias. If I wouldn't buy it with my own dollars, it's kind of like I say to people who say they saw something on sale. If you wouldn't buy the product at its regular price, the fact that it's on sale is irrelevant because you wouldn't have bought it anyway. So it was only worth to you what you paid. So I'm encouraged when we're using a subsidy, say, to develop the technology. I'm encouraged as we're advancing it to make it work. The problem that I'm having is that we're continually adding technologies that don't work, and we're subsidizing them and making people pay for them at the point that it drives up our rate. Because the other side of that is that I'm looking at the 700,000 manufacturing jobs that have left California, in large part due to the fact that our electricity bill is too damn high. And as we keep raising the cost of the power, under the auspices, one of the earlier witnesses said we create 10 jobs. Yeah, well, but I just lost 700,000 jobs and you gave me a couple of hundred. I mean, Ray Charles can see that that's a losing proposition. So I'm sympathetic to the development of the technology. I'm not as sympathetic to the continuing need for the subsidy. I'm even prepared to say that if you're doing DG and you reduce how much you use, I'm prepared to let you go. I'm prepared to modify exit fees and some of those other things. I'm less prepared to make the ratepayer, whether he or she be in Bakersfield or Compton, I'm less prepared to make them subsidize technologies that are inefficient in the name of greenhouse gas or anything else, because there's a cost that goes with that I think is problematic. So battery technology, God bless you. I hope that works, and I hope that we can get it down to where the cost of the unit is negligible. But to the extent that I'm drawing cash out of people's pockets and pretending that I'm really providing a benefit to the grid, because it ain't no benefit to the grid. One of your other witnesses said that. That's just, well, I can't really say the word I'd like to say, but it just doesn't. Now, should we expand the technology? Yeah, and I'll shut up and leave it at that. I appreciate what you're trying to do, and we've got to do that, but we need to find ways to fund this that are research-driven and not sticking it on people's bills and pretending that we're giving them a benefit. It doesn't really give them much of a benefit. DG is good. I like DG. And I think we might want to expand that for those individuals who are prepared to pay for it and make sure that exit fees and the other things we work with. But I'm just saying that the more we keep layering on cost, the more we drive up the rate, particularly to industrial customers, and we cause them to leave and we lose money. I mean, we are now losing industrial-based customers. We haven't picked up much industrial base in a long time. That becomes my concern. And again, this bill I'll look at, and I think it has potential. But I understand the time. I understand the other things you need. I just hope that we begin to look at it and mitigate the cost shift to other people.
Thank you, Senator. If I just
that was more of a statement, and we have a long list of support. We have 3 bills left, and we have session at noon. Maybe one sentence.
I would only say that cost does not go directly to the ratepayer. They don't pay that 11 cents. That power gets used on site by the customer that gets the benefit for their operation to make jobs.
Okay. I mean, thank you, witness. Witnesses in support.
Julie Malinowski-Ball on behalf of Capstone Turbines. Capstone is a California manufacturing company of very clean, efficient microturbines. On behalf of its 200 employees in L.A. County, we support this bill. We believe this bill actually does create jobs for our company and actually allows us to sell more turbines in California.
Thank you. Next witness support.
Delaney Hunter on behalf of the California Center for Sustainable Energy. We're the program administrator for San Diego, and we're in strong support.
Thank you. Next witness support.
Hello, Rebecca Motola Barnes from Lightsail Energy. We're an energy storage research startup in Oakland, and we support this bill. And I just wanted to quickly address a couple things that Senator Wright said. Energy storage does, in fact, benefit the grid, and distributed generation can benefit also from having energy storage. How? Because it makes the grid more efficient. It is true.
Members, let's focus on the bill. We have three bills left today, and Senator Wright expressed where his views are on this bill, and so let's keep moving forward. Further witnesses and support.
Stacy Rhinexis, representing Danlin Solar. We do distributed solar for apartment buildings. We have a little over 1,300 projects presently in construction in urban areas. Is a great example of how state subsidies can spur these kinds of creations. We are presently not taking state subsidies, but we wouldn't have been able to get to this point if there had not been a program to begin with. We're looking very much forward to storage, being able to enhance these kinds of applications in urban environments where the grid is the most unstable, and we very much urge you to support and pass this bill.
Thank you. Further witness support, please.
Mitch Mitchell, Southern California Gas Company. We are in support of the bill as amended, as written today, with a one-year extension. And we think it's very important that everybody understand that you need to clearly spell out the objectives. We need to sit down and rewrite the rules. Some of the technologies that are receiving subsidies today don't need them. The one-year extension allows us to sit down with a member, hopefully, and rewrite the rules, clarify the objectives, and, again, give California the best opportunity for success with the new technologies going forward. Some of the things that you've heard can be addressed, but we need to rewrite the rules.
Thank you. Further witness support.
Barbara Barkovich for the California Large Energy Consumers Association. Some of our members have taken advantage of this program. Others would like to do so in order to help them to become AB 32 compliant and stay in business in California. So we urge an extension of the program, and for planning purposes for individual companies, longer than a one-year extension would be very helpful because it's hard to get these projects off the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Further witness.
Mr. Chair, members, Justin Malone on behalf of the Distributed Wind Energy Association and the California League of Conservation Voters.
and we certainly would look to a longer period than 1 year. 3 or 5 years would be optimal. Thank you.
Thank you. Further witnesses.
Mr. Chairman, members, Bill Krause representing Solar Turbines. It's a San Diego-based California company, manufactures combined heat and power technologies with 3,500 California employees, and we strongly urge you to pass this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Further witness support.
Chair and members, Reed Addis on behalf of Environmental Defense Fund and the Sonoma County Water Agency, in strong support, especially with a 5-year extension.
Thank you. Further witness support.
Jim Hawley at TechNet, California's leading technology companies. This is very important to scaling new clean energy technologies, very much in support, also in support of the multi-year extension.
Thank you. Further witnesses support.
Mr. Chairman, members, John White in support of the bill from the Clean Power Campaign.
Thank you. Further witnesses.
Chair members, Danny Curtin, California Conference of Carpenters, support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Further witnesses support.
Bernadette Del Cara, Environment California, in support.
Thank you. Further witness support. Witnesses opposition.
Mr. Chair and members, I guess I'd reflect some of Mr. Wright's positions, but there are any number of reasons to vote against this bill. First of all, the reason that it was capped is that a number of new technologies that should be self-sustaining were allowed into the program, but there was $350 million remaining in the program. So this program does not end. It carries out through 2016, according to SB 412. The reason it's capped is that there was effectively $400 million, $350 plus an additional 83, $400 million in the program. What happened to that money? It was essentially rated without PUC control, where one company's products got approximately at least a reservation for, if not the whole money, $200 million. So we're talking about a program that has been unaccountable, that has changed positions, that has had no implementing regs. So we put a cap on and we said, let's get some implementing regs where you have to find out whether or not these technologies actually need subsidies. Again, Mr. Wright's point. The program has been unaccountable. It has given subsidies where they're not needed. Second question is, have these subsidies benefited ratepayers at all? Now, 50% of them are paid for by residential ratepayers because it is a distribution charge. So Mr. Wright spoke about manufacturing, the cost of manufacturing. We would also say that residential ratepayers, we know in a number of your areas that are having real problems paying their electricity bills. $83 million, $100 million still sitting in the program unspent. 50% of it from residential ratepayers. Now, I have said, but I've been corrected on that, that there are a few fuel cells that are in among residential ratepayers. But for the most part, the vast majority of the hundreds of millions of dollars that have gone out the door for this program have been for commercial industrial applications. Why are we asking residential ratepayers? So we asked Mr. Perez in the Assembly, although the amendment was rejected, to take an amendment that says the cost allocation on this program shall be in proportion to the classes that benefit. The reason you see any number of people up here wanting this bill is, of course, anybody wants a subsidy that reaches into somebody else's pocket. We had the other question here, if we've had discussions of the public goods charge, and everybody's paid careful attention to the public goods charge, which is in the Renewable Resources Trust Fund, that's $70 million. In the PEER program, that's $70 million. Here we're waving our hands at $83 million and saying, let's extend it for many, many years. Now this bill, fortunately, narrows it down to 1 year, and that's only because there was a raid on the program that was unaccountable for the money. So why are we talking about extending a program that doesn't work? And another major question here, the governor has called for 12,000 megawatts of distributed generation. There is no coherent and consistent program that tells us how much that's going to cost and how we're going to get there. So if we have some part of the Renewable Resource Trust Fund on the table, we have some part of the SGIP program, which is already $100 million sitting there in a fund and unspent on the table. Let's have a coherent discussion about how to do that. Let's not just extend this program. The one good thing I would say is the Commission has done a fairly good job, as we understand it, with the implementation regs. Prior to this, there were no regs, and we just tossed money out willy-nilly to everybody subsidizing. So let's take a look at those implementation regs before we move on with this program, which has been so completely unaccountable, which is a huge subsidy to technologies that don't need it. The care that this committee has put into the public purpose program discussions should also be the kind of due diligence and care put into this program, which we know has been worse managed, far worse than the public purpose programs.
Thank you. Further witnesses opposition? Senator Rubio. Mr. Goldberg.
In the analysis, it doesn't state that there's any opposition on file.
We have had a letter in from day one, and I probably should have resent that over to the committee, but it was in, and Kelly and I talked about that.
Let me understand this. In terms of the implementation regs that you refer to, were those lacking in SB 412 and 411 PO that first started this program?
No, they were lacking when the SB 412 bill was passed. Fortunately, the way SB 412 was written, it said no more. We've got up to authorized $400 or so million in the program. Let's cap the funds and then allow for the SB 412 regs. To which, as the bill was written, it said, call for regulations that make sure we're not handing out money to people who don't need it. So the SB 412 regs have not been implemented, and they're expected to take place through 2016 for the program. The problem is that $400 million that was expected to be spent carefully under the SB 412 program got raided and was let out the door by much of that let out the door by the Commission, so we're not talking about as much money to implement.
Right, and obviously I wasn't here when that bill was passed in the legislature. You're going to have to help me with this historical perspective, and that is, in that bill or subsequent bills, has there ever been a report required to be submitted to the legislature to tell exactly how every single penny has been spent?
There have been some prior reports. There was one that was done. What happened was the first program just let the money out the door after the electricity crisis because we needed to bring on more power. A lot of it was CHP. It also paid for solar. So what happened with the solar was that got moved over to the CSI program as a separate charge. So then it only had fuel cells and wind in it, and no money was being collected and none was getting out the door, at which point Senator Kehoe's bill allowed combined heat and power to come back in. We objected to that because CHP might be a fine technology, really didn't make the case that it needed subsidy. But at least the Commission said, okay, the bill said, Commission, look at what's really in need of subsidy and what benefits we're getting here. So at that point, the money was accumulated and there was no way to spend it. So that's where 412 put the cap on it. And then since then there was the raid. I'm not sure I responded directly to your question. Oh, there were some evaluations, some of which were kept at the Commission.
Understood. So I'm trying to